I'm Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today.
You know, Renee, I am so excited about today's show. We've got two brand new guests talking about some cool stuff we've not talked about before. We have Jess Slade, who is the native plants curator or collections curator at the Arboretum, which is the state botanical garden, and that's here in Lexington, Kentucky. So we're excited to hear from Jess and what they've got going over and on in the Arboretum. And then we also have a brand new guest in Kesley Baker, who's with the Kentucky Division of Forestry. And she's a wildfire mitigation specialist, and she's going to be talking about how we can keep our homes safe during wildfire season, which is coming up here in Kentucky soon.
Definitely. So you know what? We want to go ahead and get to those programs. So let's get started.
All right. Sounds good.
Hi. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This is my first time on here. I'm excited to participate.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about what your presentation is going to be about today.
Sure. So I'm going to be talking about the Arboretum Woods, which is a natural area right in the heart of Lexington that I'm sure a lot of the viewers are familiar with. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, what is this area, what makes it special, and some of the management strategies that we're using to try to improve it that maybe you could even use in your own natural area or woodlot.
Wonderful.
Yep.
All right. You can go ahead and share your screen, and we look forward to your presentation.
Okay. So as I mentioned, my name is Jess Slade from the Arboretum, State Botanical Garden of Kentucky. I'll be talking about the Arboretum Woods today, but just in case you aren't familiar with the Arboretum, I wanted to start with a brief introduction to who we are. The Arboretum State Botanical Garden of Kentucky is affiliated with the University of Kentucky and also the Lexington-Fayette Urban County government. And our mission is to showcase Kentucky's landscapes and serve as a resource for environmental and horticultural education, research, and conservation. And if you have visited the Arboretum, you may know, you might not have even been in the woods. In my role as the curator and native plants collection manager, I manage 65-acre native plant collection that you see if you walk along a 2-mile walking path. So all of those plants are planted and intentional. We keep plant records for them, and they represent the plants that grow across the state. So basically, as you move through the collection, you get a glimpse of some of the different species and ecological communities that occur in different parts of the state. So that is quite different from the Arboretum Woods. So just keep that in mind. Some of my role is to showcase Kentucky's plants. These are just a few of the wildflowers that are native to the state that you might see when visiting the Arboretum, depending on when you go. And so these give examples to visitors of how these plants can be used ornamentally in their own landscapes. And also we conserve rare species from the state, rare species and genotypes. One example of that is this red flower that you see on the right, which is called royal catchfly. So we have those sort of scattered throughout the collection, in addition to the trees and other woody plants. And I start with that introduction just to help you distinguish the Arboretum Woods from the rest of the collection. The Arboretum Woods is totally different because it is actually a remnant natural area. It is 15 acres and the community type is an inner bluegrass woodland. And so the plants that you see in the woods were not planted for the most part. There has been a little bit of restoration planting, but mostly these are just things that have been allowed to come up from seed and are remnant of the natural area that has existed there for centuries. And so it's pretty special that this exists right in downtown Lexington because it's in the inner bluegrass region, which is heavily developed with urban areas. And then also outside of their urban areas, it's been primarily converted to agriculture and then also to pasture land for horses or livestock. The soils in the region are very rich and deep. So the soils that we have underneath the Arboretum Woods, the series that we have there are Maury, Bluegrass, and Newark. And these are all characterized as being fertile, deep soils that are really highly attractive for use as agriculture or for livestock grazing. And so that's part of the reason why most of those natural areas don't exist anymore. And if you're moving, just in case you're curious, if you're moving through the woods, you might notice some of the areas are a bit wetter. That is usually over the Newark series, which is poorly drained with seasonal standing water. And that might be part of the reason why this area wasn't developed initially. Oh, here we go. So another thing that is just unique about the Arboretum Woods is that it represents a remnant of an inner bluegrass woodland, which is a type of ecological community that is special to the bluegrass region in Kentucky. It is essentially a savanna-like community, which is a hotly debated topic that I'm not going to try to go into today, because there's lots of different opinions about what this community looked like historically and sort of what maintained it. But it's basically a grassland, like a type of grassland with open grown trees, sparse canopy, and light dependent grasses and forbs in the understory. This community type is disturbance adapted, so it relies on disturbances like grazing and fire, either natural wildfires or prescribed fires that we do today in our natural areas, but also Native Americans would use historically in order to open up forests. And so it's a fire dependent community, or it's a disturbance dependent community. It's distinctive from other types of grassland because the understory is dominated by cool season grasses rather than native warm season grasses, and cane brakes were common throughout this community. And unfortunately, all of the remnants of this community type that remain today are pretty severely impacted by humans and non-native species. And because of that, like even though the Arboretum's woods are pretty impacted, if you've been in there, you've seen lots of, if you know what you're looking at, lots of winter creeper and invasive species, but it's actually still one of the best remaining examples of this community type. And there are some veteran trees that grow in there, such as the chinkapin oak that we see here on the left, and the blue ash that we see on the right. We have several, large old trees that are estimated to be 200 to 400 years old that were not cut down when a lot of the area in Lexington was originally deforested. So it's a good place to see those. An interesting note about those species that are in the canopy is that they are fire adapted species. And the assemblage of the community is distinctive as well. Some of the common species that you would see in there are Kentucky coffee tree, bur oak, chinkapin oak, blue ash, Ohio buckeye, things like that, that really just make this community special. And there's a few understory plants like wildflowers and ferns that are distinctive to this community as well. And some of them are still occurring in the woods. And we're hoping to expand those and have them be a greater part of the community as we move forward with management. A couple of those species that I just wanted to highlight are the fragile fern, which we see in this middle picture, and then our native wild hyacinth flower that you see on the right. We manage this area completely differently from the rest of the Arboretum. So when you walk in, you might wonder what's going on here. Are we just not taking care of it? Actually, we are. It's just for a different purpose. We leave wood that has fallen down, trees and logs and branches, etc. We just leave them laying on the ground to decompose. We leave snags standing for wildlife habitat. And as long as they're not hazardous. And then we allow native vines to grow up the trees, things like grapevine and Virginia creeper that are just part of this ecological community and don't hurt anything here. We also don't pull things that you might consider weeds in your home garden. So things like pokeweed and ragweed that are actually, important parts of this community and provide cover and food for wildlife. And some of the famous wildlife that we have, or I guess well-known by visitors, are our owls. We've got nesting screech owls that have been coming through every winter. And one of our volunteers, Ward, took some beautiful photos of them. We've also got great horned owls. We see box turtles, squirrels, chipmunks. There was a resident turkey in the neighborhood for a while, and we've even seen a deer recently. So it does provide a little bit of important wildlife habitat in such an urban area. One of the challenges that we have in the woods, and I'm sure anybody who has property that they're managing, especially in the urban areas of Kentucky, is invasive species. And so I guess I just want to talk a little bit about how we're managing those and how you might be able to approach them on your own property. One of the biggest problems, which has basically carpeted the entire woods, is winter creeper, which you see on the left here. It's an evergreen vine that has just like smothered the ground cover, and it'll climb up the trees and smother those as well. And then we also try to manage new and emerging species to the woods. So things like the Italian arum and lesser celandine that are pictured here that aren't really big problems yet, just to prevent them from becoming a problem like the winter creeper has. One thing that is not an invasive species, but if you're not familiar, might not know, it looks a lot like bamboo, is our native river cane. And this is actually an important component of this community type and an important species in understory forests in the bluegrass, especially in the floodplains. So why do we manage invasive species? Why do I recommend managing invasive species on your property? We protect our trees from the climbing and smothering invasive vines like the winter creeper. And we also really want to increase the diversity of native plant species, not just in the canopy and the woody plants, but also in the understory. And in turn, that improves wildlife habitat. And we want to prevent seed dispersal of those species into new areas, either at the Arboretum or in the surrounding community. And some of the general management strategies, the basic strategies that we use, and which I think is a really good way to approach any sort of land that you're managing, is that we start with the best areas first. So the areas that are least impacted, we try to keep them in the best shape. And then we also want to limit the seed production and dispersal, especially of species that are not common on the site yet. And then targeting plants at their most susceptible times. So just knowing sort of what the biology of the different species are, especially, like when they're going to produce fruit and when they are most likely to be impacted and controlled, and making decisions based on that. And then we want to prevent new invasions, like I mentioned previously. So anything that's sort of like just starting to pop up. We just found stilt grass in the woods for the first time. It's kind of crazy. A few weeks ago. And so I went right away to prevent that from producing seed, because that's not a problem that we have yet, but it could be. And then follow-up management. It's important to just know that this is not a one and done situation. It's going to take years and years. And after the initial work has been put in, it's really important to follow up and make sure that you actually like improve the place and get natives to reestablish and prevent new invasions. And finally, we do plan on doing some restoration planting of native species where necessary. So we use mechanical management for our invasives. So things like the weed wrench here on the left, we use to pull up invasive woodies. You can mow things when they're about to go to seed to prevent seed dispersal. And then we pull things like garlic mustard that you can see pictured on the right. And we rely heavily on volunteers. We have a very small staff at the Arboretum, and we have a Thursday group of volunteers that comes year round. If anybody who's watching this is interested in joining us, happy to have any help I can get. It's a really fun group, and we do a lot of invasive management with them. And then Dr. Crocker, who you all are very familiar with from this show, she brings her class, her spring Forestry 399 class to the Arboretum, and the students get a chance to work hands-on with these species, learn about their biology and their management. We also, unfortunately, need to use chemical management. We try to use mechanical management for as much as possible. But for things like the winter creeper, which is really just established in the space, we are using a foliar herbicide application for that. And we'll use cut stump treatments for certain other invasives, but we try to minimize impacts on any of the desirable natives that we have on the site. And so I'll just briefly talk about the winter creeper because I get this question a lot, and it's a common invasive in the Lexington area and central bluegrass. We are managing that by cutting the vines from the trees to prevent the seed production, and then doing spot herbicide treatments in areas where we've managed it before. And then we're also expanding those areas slowly by doing treatments during the dormant season. And so we use a foliar application of triclopyr during the dormant season in order to minimize impacts on other species that are more desirable in the area that usually are coming up in like March. The winter creeper is evergreen and green all year, so we can target it during that time when it's the only thing growing. And here's just an image of showing that in progress, like the winter creeper starting to die in the woods. And I've got some other photos, I didn't include them here, of just like how starkly different it looks having the winter creeper versus the sedges and grasses that we actually want in there. And here's a photo of some of our volunteers helping with a restoration planting a couple years ago. So just briefly, I want to talk about the long-term vision for the woods. So as you visit, just sort of understanding like what our goals are and what we're hoping to I guess, move towards, especially as we're doing pretty intensive management in there. Our major goal is to replace the winter creeper with a diverse set of native herbaceous plants, wildflowers, sedges, and grasses that are actually, belong in this community. Things like the blue-eyed Marys that you see blooming in this floodplain forest in these photos. Ryegrass was another really dominant species that was noted historically for this community type. So that's something that we'll be spreading to help cover the ground as we manage the winter creeper. And then just like I said, increasing the diversity. The site is actually also a historic site of the rare species running buffalo clover. It has been extirpated from the site, meaning it no longer occurs there. But we're hoping to be able to restore it as we move forward. And the fact that that occurred there is actually a sign that this community is disturbance adapted, because that is a disturbance adapted species that relies on especially like grazing and trampling animals and riparian areas, like the sort of water coming through and causing disturbance on the soil. Some of the other species that occur there that we hope to expand as we manage the winter creeper include the white trout lily and purple phacelia. And then another future goal is to try to open up some of the areas to become more like an open woodland, something that we think this community looked like historically. And that's sort of a long-term step because we really need to get the invasive species under control, but that will require some simulation of disturbance, some sort of prescribed fire, mowing, or grazing that is just an integral component to this ecosystem, and to, frankly, a lot of the forests in the state of Kentucky like rely on this historically. And I just want to put out there for anybody who is visiting the Arboretum, if you have ideas about a research project, students or faculty at UK, we work with them. Would love to collaborate to learn more about what's going on in the woods, and monitor sort of management effects and changes over time. And we are planning to install a new interpretive kiosk at the entrance to the woods, and that's in progress. The design for that is in progress right now, so that we can share the knowledge about this natural area to the public and how it differs from the rest of the Arboretum. And I guess that's it. I know this is a little different than what you guys usually do, because I'm highlighting a specific place and project, but I would be glad to answer any questions or discuss farther. You can email me.
Well, Jess, you're a great ambassador for the Arboretum. Thank you very much. I'm like, you got me so fired up. I've been over there so many times, but now I'm like, I need to go back.
Yeah, well, let me know when you come.
Yeah.
It just seemed like there was a diverse amount of things going on there.
There is a lot, but I think that makes it a really special place, and it's open to the public, 365 days a year, dawn to dusk. And so it's just this really unique place where, there's research, and then there's conservation, and then there's public and people biking and running, and it's very alive.
I know a lot of our extension folks and people that are on this show quite often use the Arboretum for different various things. I know Dr. Crocker and Dr. Springer have both used the Arboretum. So we greatly appreciate you allowing us to be able to have that area.
Oh yeah, no, I'm happy to have people use it and share knowledge of what you learn about it, and that can help inform what we do there too. So
excellent. Well, Jess, we'll have you back, as you got things going on, holler at us, and we'd love to share, what the Arboretum's up to for sure.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Resource. Thank you
No
so
problem.
much. Oh, Renee, that was really cool. Right?
It was really neat. A neat segment to have on to learn all the different things about the Arboretum.
Well, yeah, and I encourage our viewers, if you're in the area, come check it out, right?
Yeah, and that's the middle of Lexington, so I mean, you can get away from everything and just kind of walk around the woods. It's a nice little area to have.
And they have trees from all over Kentucky there. So if you want to, learn your trees, what a great place to do it as well.
Exactly. Well, now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and she's going to teach us how to protect our home from wildfire.
Yeah, which is really important, right?
Exactly. So Kelsey, if you'd like to go ahead and turn your camera on.
Hello there.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Hi.
We appreciate you being on. And, it just seems like there's probably some obvious things that you can do to protect your home from fire. But I'm assuming you're going to tell us a few things that aren't so obvious as well.
Well, maybe not. A lot of things are obvious, but people think about them a little too late. Fire season is upon us now. It starts October 1st. So right now is the perfect time to get out in your yard and do some of these things to hopefully protect your home and property from a wildfire. Hopefully that won't ever happen, but it's almost inevitable here anymore. So yeah.
Well, okay.
Enjoy your watching your presentation.
All right. Okay, there. Everybody can see?
Yep, that's good.
Good deal. All right. So like they said, my name is Kesley Baker. I am the Wildfire Mitigation Specialist for Kentucky Division of Forestry. And today I'm hoping to talk at least briefly about wildfire risk and what each of us can do to hopefully make our homes safer in the event of a wildfire. So first, a little bit of background on wildfires. Here in Kentucky, like I said, forest fire season starts October 1st and runs through December 15th. Then again from February 15th to April 30th. A lot of people may mistake summer as a dangerous time for fires, but actually the prime time for fires to spread is when the leaves are falling off the trees, and then again right before they grow back. This allows the sun to reach the forest floor and dry out some of the fuels. Also, the humidity is usually lower during this time, unlike summer where the humidity is usually high. So this allows for more moisture to be pulled from those fuels. It is important to remember that no matter how many resources your community, your county, or your state may have, there's rarely ever going to be enough to suppress a wildfire and save properties. Unlike a structure fire, wildfires can span across hundreds of thousands of acres, and a number of homes threatened are usually often just as high. Wildfires are actually the easiest natural disaster to mitigate because even though wildfire on the landscape is inevitable, there are things you can do beforehand to reduce the likelihood of home and property damage, and in extreme cases, loss of life. Okay, so the amount of homes threatened by wildfire is often due to people living within the wildland-urban interface, also called the WUI. I like saying WUI, or the area where structures and developed lands meet or intermingle with woodlands. Actually, in Kentucky, 55% of residents are directly exposed to wildfire, meaning they live right in the WUI. Another 34% are indirectly exposed, suggesting that they live outside of the WUI, but could still likely be impacted by other structures burning nearby. So Jack Cohen, he was a U.S. Forest Service research fire scientist that brought us many of the fire mitigation concepts that we use today. He spent years determining the vulnerabilities of homes and how they ultimately ignite when exposed to wildfires. He's quoted by saying, community wildfire risk should be defined as a home ignition problem, not a wildfire control problem. And what he's actually saying is that wildfires are going to occur. That's a given. But we need to look more about how we can adapt to the fire rather than trying to control it. So he came up with a concept of the home ignition zone and how to create defensible space with this area around your property. To begin, we want to focus on the home or structure itself, and then at least 30 feet around the property from all sides. When you inspect this area of your home, you want to think of the terms lean, clean, and green. The immediate zone is 0 to 5 feet from your home. If you do have a porch, a deck, a garage, or even a wooden fence that's attached to your home, in this scenario, you want to consider that as part of your home. The intermediate zone is 5 to 30 feet. And the extended zone is 30 feet and beyond. So sometimes we will find risks that we just can't deal with. It's out of our control. And to counter this, it is recommended that you extend your defensible space out to help reduce some of that risk. So a home risk assessment helps homeowners and residents determine what they need to look for and provides a point score system to classify risk as low, moderate, high, or extreme. Now, this one on the screen is the one that we use in Kentucky, but if you do a Google search, you can find several different styles. They usually cover the same material, just sometimes word it differently or in a different format. But right now, we are going to take a virtual tour of a home and discuss some of the features of the wildfire risk assessment and see kind of how this home fares and what their wildfire risk could possibly be. Okay, I apologize for the shaking camera and some of the stuff, but anyway, so here we are walking up this steep driveway. It appears to at least be 12 feet wide. There's enough vertical and horizontal clearance for an emergency vehicle, but it is mostly gravel and dirt, so that could cause some issues. It happens to be less than 5 miles from the nearest fire station, so that's a plus. But the first thing I notice is the wooden porch attachment. So as we come around the house, though, the yard and 5 feet from the house does look fairly cleared with only low cut grass. The siding is vinyl, which is better than cedar shake or wood, but worse than brick or metal. A home address is clearly marked with reflective signing, but it wasn't visible as you approach the home from the front of the drive. So that's something to think. Looking closer on the house, I see the vents have an 1/8-inch screening to keep leaves and burning embers out, although it is slightly damaged, it seems. Moving on, there is a large wooden attachment at the back of the house. Wood mulch appears to be used in the garden beds, which is highly flammable and it can be dangerous. However, around the area seems to be very cleared of debris, leaves, and other vegetation, leaving only the green grass. The deck is closed off, and as you can see, turning around, there is no flammable vegetation near the deck or the house from this angle at all. So that is a definite plus. Now, as we go to the other side, you can see some twigs growing out of the gutter, which is quite often, I find. Undoubted indication of vegetation and debris that could ignite in the gutters and possibly spread to the house. One good thing is the roof and gutters are both metal, so that is a plus. Also, we see 2 large propane tanks. Now, sometimes, you know, you may have a propane tank in your yard that you can't deal with. Fortunately, here in this case, it does seem to be fairly cleared out, nothing but just green grass, a few little plants and whatnot. But for the most part, they have cleared around that propane tank and kind of considered it part of the house. Let's see. So far, as we go through, I haven't seen any damaged windows. They all appear to be updated, so most likely double pane windows. On each side of the house, you see a water hose that can be used to defend the property against a wildfire. Now, this tree here can be considered a little too close to the house, and is probably what's causing the debris in the gutters. But you could easily fix this by pruning some branches and possibly the bottom third of the tree trunk there to get that off of the ground. And making our way to the first attachment here, peeking through the lattice, you can see piles of leaves underneath. This is exactly what we don't want. It creates the perfect place for embers to settle and potentially ignite. So it could burn through the wooden porch and onto the house. Then we walk around to look at the shed that is within 100 feet, but over 30 feet away. But unfortunately, it is butted right up against the woods. You can see the branches in the back and the branches over top, literally touching the structure. So that could be a potential issue if that were to ignite and then possibly spread to the house. But other than that, it looks okay. So overall, most of the home does in fact have at least 30 feet of defensible space, except for the small portion in the front that I noticed. It actually has this huge steep drop off, which is fairly overgrown, as you can tell. And then as we just saw, the wooden structure with the leaves underneath, that could potentially cause some very high risk. My recommendation would be to put mesh screen under the front porch and remove more vegetation on the other side of the driveway, all around the home. Also ensure the water hoses are in working order and add a second address sign towards the end of the driveway. So that is just like a brief walkthrough. But now you can learn a whole lot more about your own personal wildfire risk on wildfirerisk.org. Hopefully this link will work and will pull up. Okay, you can put in your community or county. I've put in the state to kind of show, what you can look at, but you can look at interactive maps talking about risk to homes, exposure type. Here's where I got the information about the 55% directly exposed to flammable vegetation. Wildfire likelihood, as you can see over here on the eastern side of Kentucky, is lit up pretty good. So, and then you also can view vulnerable populations. And this is mainly just to kind of see who is around and different, I guess, factors, like, for example, households with no car. So if a wildfire was to come through, then those people are going to be, more vulnerable. So, and then we can go back. And this actually explains a lot of the factors that go into the interactive maps and the data. And you can read through and get a better understanding of where that information comes from and how they calculate those risks. If you go back to the reduce, this is actually a huge thing. You can look through and read about all kinds of different ways to reduce your risk, including like wildfire prevention, wildfire preparedness, community health, all kinds of good, wonderful information. I'm just going to click on one, the home ignition zone, like we were talking about, and it brings up a little bit more in detailed information about it, even some videos from YouTube from Dr. Jack Cohen. And then it also has community tools. And if you scroll down, you can look at all of the community tools. And this is just a wonderful list of all kinds of different resources that you can look through and learn about your wildfire risk, or a lot of other different things about wildfire as well. Even how to get some community assistance if you're looking into that. So there's the Firewise USA. Actually, Kentucky is part of the Firewise USA, so that would be a good resource to use. So, okay. Well, that is all I've got for today. Thank you for listening to me today. I hope I've at least talked a little bit about the importance of wildfire risk and some of the simple ways we can all act proactively for the best before a wildfire strikes. And, part of living among the forest is enjoying the good aspects, yet still being prepared for the bad. But thank you.
Well, we greatly appreciate you being on. And if anybody has any questions, please just type them in the chat pod. But, fires tend to be something that happens all the time in Kentucky in the spring and the fall. Is there a specific time where they're worse? Spring or fall, or is it kind of about even?
Usually we have more fire starts in the fall, but statistically the fires are larger in the spring. So I'm not sure exactly what that is. It could be where in the spring people are burning off their garden beds, could cause a bigger issue, but typically that's just kind of how it rolls here in Kentucky.
Hmm.
Well, Kesley, I really appreciate you being on today. You showed some new tools that have kind of been developed and I was unfamiliar with. So those are really nice additions to your tool belt, I guess, to help folks be able to navigate that. So it's really important for people, like you said, do this before the fires come, right? Not it's a little late when the fire's running up the hill to be dealing with this stuff.
Exactly. If you can see the wildfire out your door, you've waited too late.
Right. So listen to Miss Baker and get on it.
Well, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll have you on again.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Awesome. Good stuff. Wow. Hey, 2 brand new guests, 2 brand new topics, really good content. Wow. Good stuff.
Yeah, very good stuff. And we always appreciate any content that you might have ideas on. You can go to fromthewoodstoday.com and submit those, and we might actually put it on the show.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm sure you all are out there seeing some cool stuff in your woods. You've got questions about what's going on. Let us know. Fill out that survey on fromthewoodstoday.com and we will respond accordingly.
Definitely. Until then, we will see you next Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Take care.
All right. Thanks for being with us. Bye-bye, everyone.
From the woods today.